Hello to all the valued listeners tuning in to the Storyteller's Corner channel. Today's story. During a meal, my husband secretly put something strange into my bowl of oatmeal. My 5-year-old son quietly pushed it over to his grandmother. 5 minutes later, my husband was in a panic. My name is Sarah, and I'm a 33-year-old woman working as an administrative assistant for a construction supply company in the next town over. I wasn't looking for wealth, just a peaceful home. The sound of my son's laughter in the morning, a hot meal in the evening. And yet, there are days when you think you're living in peace until one small thing happens that shows you the storm that's been brewing beneath the surface for a long time. Our house is on a quiet cul-de-sac tucked away at the very end. The street is narrow, a place where neighbors give a friendly wave as they pass. Every morning, I'd hear the gentle whir of a distant lawnmower, the quiet thump of the newspaper delivery, and the cheerful chatter of neighbors heading out early. I've been married to David for 11 years. He's 3 years older than me and works as a warehouse supervisor for a logistics company. Outsiders always said he was a quiet, hard-working, and gentle man. I used to believe that too. I believed it so much that I would scold myself for having suspicious thoughts whenever he acted strangely. Living with us was David's mother, Eleanor, who was 73. She suffered from arthritis in her knees, which ached terribly whenever the weather turned damp. At night, she often had a dry cough, and some nights she struggled to breathe, having to sit up and rub her chest. I was her daughter-in-law, and I treated her with the respect and care she deserved. I wouldn't say I was perfect, but I knew we had a bond of affection and duty. She was an elder, and it was our responsibility to care for her. My son, Leo, is 5 years old and attends kindergarten just a few blocks away. He's small for his age but sharp, with bright, observant eyes. Sometimes, when he watched adults talk, I got the feeling he understood far more than a child his age should. In the days leading up to that incident, I had been feeling unusually tired. It started with a dull headache, a persistent, gentle pressure on my temples. Then my throat became dry, and food lost its taste. I'd wake up feeling completely drained. I blamed it on the year-end rush at work, the mountain of paperwork, and the evenings spent helping Leo with his letters and making sure Eleanor took her medication. I bought some cold medicine, drank ginger tea, and used warm compresses, but nothing helped. One day, while washing dishes, a wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the sink to keep from falling. I told David, "I'm so tired, I think I need to see a doctor." He just mumbled, "Yeah, you should go when you have a free day." His reply was technically correct, but it felt hollow, like something said just to end the conversation. That morning, a cold drizzle was falling. It wasn't a downpour, just a persistent mist that seemed to seep into everything. A northern wind whistled through the window frames, making the floor tiles ice cold. I opened my eyes, my head feeling as heavy as a stone. Leo was still curled up in his blankets, his hair tousled, breathing evenly. From the living room, I heard my mother-in-law let out a few long, dry coughs. I got out of bed, intending to get her some warm water. As I rubbed my temples, all I craved was something hot to chase away the chill. From the kitchen, David's voice called out, "Sarah, come down and eat." I made some oatmeal. It's still hot. I stopped in my tracks. He rarely cooked in the mornings. If he did, it was just reheating leftovers or buying takeout. I thought I had misheard and had to ask, "You cooked?" "Yeah," he replied curtly. "Come on down before it gets cold." I took Leo downstairs. Our kitchen was small, just big enough for a refrigerator, a stove, and a worn-out wooden dining table. On the stove, a pot of oatmeal was simmering, steam fogging up the window. The warm, comforting scent of cinnamon and cooked oats filled the air, promising warmth. Eleanor was sitting at the table, wrapped in an old wool sweater, rubbing her hands together. Looking at the pot of oatmeal, my heart softened a little. When you're feeling sick, a hot bowl of oatmeal can make everything feel a little better. David stood with his back to us, holding a ladle. He scooped the oatmeal quickly, the metal clinking sharply against the pot's rim. As I pulled out a chair for Eleanor, I joked, "Wow, what's the special occasion? You must really love me if you're cooking while I'm sick." He didn't smile. He just grunted in response and leaned over the pot as if to avoid splatters, his shoulders slightly hunched. For some reason, That posture struck me as odd, like someone trying to conceal what they were doing. Leo climbed onto his chair, his legs dangling, his eyes still heavy with sleep. I stroked his hair. "Sit nicely, honey. After you eat, Mommy will take you to school." He didn't answer, just looked from the pot of oatmeal to his father, his eyes suddenly wide awake. David placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of me. It was my favorite white ceramic bowl with a blue flower pattern. The oatmeal was thick, sprinkled with a little cinnamon. The rising steam made my eyes water. "Eat up," he said, his voice low but firm. "Get your strength back." He then placed a spoon next to the bowl, pushing it closer to me, as if afraid I'd change my mind. I picked up the spoon, about to stir the oatmeal to cool it down. At that very moment, a strange feeling pricked at me, as subtle as a hair caught in my throat, not painful, but unsettling. I looked up at David. He avoided my gaze, his eyes darting from my hand holding the spoon to Leo. My son sat perfectly still, his lips pressed together as if holding his breath. Before I could bring the spoon to my mouth, the wind howled, rattling the roof, and rain lashed against the porch. Inside the small kitchen, the scent of the oatmeal grew stronger. My mother-in-law coughed softly, her hand on her chest. I put my hand on the warm bowl, telling myself to just eat a few spoonfuls for warmth. I had to stay strong. I had an elderly mother-in-law and a young child to care for. But just then, Leo straightened his back, his eyes wide, his small hands gripping the edge of his chair. I thought he was cold and leaned down to whisper, "What's wrong, honey?" Leo didn't answer. He just stared intently at the bowl of oatmeal in front of me. His gaze was fixed on my oatmeal, as taut as a violin string. While I was still trying to understand, he suddenly stood up, the wooden chair scraping against the floor. He didn't cry or shout. He simply reached out with his two small hands and gently slid my bowl across the table, over to Eleanor. I froze. My first instinct was to pull it back. "Leo, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice a mix of surprise and fear of startling him. But before my hand could touch the bowl, another hand stopped me, David's. His touch was light, but the pressure was firm, a silent, non-negotiable command. I looked at him. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the bowl of oatmeal as if it were a critical piece that had to be in the right place. Leo mumbled, his eyes cast down. "Grandma has been coughing for days. Grandma should eat the oatmeal to get better. Mom can have toast." As he spoke, he pressed his lips together and swallowed hard. I felt my own throat go dry. Leo had always been a sweet boy who loved his grandmother, but this act of reassigning a bowl of oatmeal felt different. It wasn't the simple thoughtfulness of a 5-year-old. It was like someone trying to correct a mistake that had just been made. My mother-in-law was immediately touched. She reached out and stroked her grandson's head, her voice hoarse but happy. "My goodness, my sweet boy is already looking after his grandma." "All right, I'll eat it." "Sarah, you have some toast, dear." I was about to say I'd make another bowl, but David cut in quickly, his tone perfectly reasonable. "Yes, let Mom eat it. You can have toast. The oatmeal is hot. You might burn yourself." He spoke as if he were taking care of the whole family, but I heard an unusual urgency in his voice, like someone trying to finalize a deal before anyone could reconsider. I sat back down, still holding the spoon, not knowing what to do with it. Leo stood beside Eleanor, his shoulders tense, not daring to look at me. I tried to catch his eye to ask him more, but he avoided my gaze. David turned back to the kitchen, pretending to be busy getting more bowls, spoons, and water. He moved a little too quickly, like someone anxious about time. Eleanor picked up her spoon, blew on it, and took a small bite. I watched, my heart still uneasy. After the second spoonful, she paused. The spoon stopped mid-air, her face wrinkled, and her brows furrowed. "David, why does the oatmeal taste so bitter today?" She put the spoon down, rubbing her chest. "It tastes strange." My heart pounded against my ribs. I looked directly at David. He was visibly startled. It was only for a split second, but it was enough for me to see. He immediately forced a laugh, trying to sound calm. "It's the ginger, Mom. It's cold this morning, so I added extra to warm you up. Just eat slowly. It's fine." "Extra ginger makes it taste bitter like this?" Eleanor was still rubbing her chest, her voice full of doubt. David leaned closer to her, his voice softening. "Just eat a little, Mom. I'll pour you some warm water." He reached for the thermos, poured a glass, and placed it next to her. The movement was so swift it seemed pre-planned. I looked at the glass of warm water, then at the bowl of oatmeal, and then back at David. A strange chill ran down my spine. The kitchen was the same. The rain still drizzled outside, but the air felt thick and heavy. Leo clutched the hem of my shirt. I was startled. I hadn't realized he had come back to my side. His hand was ice cold. I looked down at him. He didn't say anything, just shook his head very slightly, his eyes red as if he was fighting back tears. I wanted to pull him into my arms and demand to know what was wrong, but my mother-in-law was right there, clearly unwell. If I, the daughter-in-law, voiced a suspicion now, it would be like pouring gasoline on a fire. Silence is golden, they say. But sometimes, staying silent isn't about keeping the peace. It's about giving yourself time to see clearly what's happening. I stood up, took a piece of toast from the basket, and nibbled on it for show. It was dry and stuck in my throat. I forced myself to swallow, to act normal. A single question echoed in my mind. Why was Leo so afraid of that bowl of oatmeal? David returned to the table and looked at me. "You're not having any?" "I feel a little nauseous," I replied softly. "Toast is fine for now." He grunted, but his eyes never left me. It wasn't the look of a husband worried about his wife. It was the look of someone checking to see if his plan was proceeding as expected. I felt like I was in a chess game where I didn't know the rules, and my opponent had already planned his next several moves. Eleanor sighed and waved her hand. "Oh, it's probably just my cough making everything taste bitter. I'll just have a little and then rest." I helped her up and walked her to her room. She moved slowly, her arthritic knee causing her to limp. As I supported her, I reminded myself that no matter what was happening, she was the most frail person in the house. I couldn't let her become a victim of anything, regardless of who it came from. When I returned to the kitchen, David was cleaning up. He scooped the remaining oatmeal from the pot into a container, sealing the lid tightly. Leo sat on a chair, staring at the floor, looking completely drained. I put my hand on his back and asked softly, "Are you cold, honey?" Leo didn't answer. He just leaned his head against my hand for a moment before sitting up straight again. In his silence, I sensed a fear that didn't belong in childhood. I said nothing more. Nor did I ask David any more questions. I just stood there, looking at the tightly sealed container of oatmeal, and told myself that sometimes a family's peace doesn't shatter with a thunderclap. It breaks with small, hurried, and strange movements, like the way a 5-year-old boy had just used all his courage to push a bowl of oatmeal away from his mother. The moment Eleanor lay down, she started coughing again, a dry, ragged sound that scraped her throat. I pulled the blanket up for her and placed a glass of warm water within her reach. She waved it away. "Don't worry about me. It's just old age and bad weather." But her face was pale, and her eyes were half closed with exhaustion. I went out to the living room and saw Leo still sitting on the edge of the chair, his feet not swinging as they usually did. He stared at the floor, occasionally glancing toward his grandmother's room, afraid she might hear something. David stood by the door, putting on his jacket, his voice deliberately normal. "I'll take Leo to school today. You stay home and look after Mom." I looked at him. For the first time that morning, I saw him volunteer for a task he usually avoided. Normally, if I asked him to drop Leo off, he would sigh and complain about being late. Today, he said it so quickly, as if it were the most natural and urgent thing in the world. I didn't argue. I just bent down to fix Leo's collar and whispered, "Be a good boy at school. If anything happens, you tell Mommy." Leo didn't say okay, as he usually did. He just gave a tiny nod, his eyes avoiding mine. I wanted to hold his hand a moment longer, but David hurried him. "Come on, son, we'll be late." As they left, I stood at the door and watched them go. After a few steps, Leo suddenly turned his head, his gaze lingering on me longer than usual, a mix of worry and unspoken words. I raised my hand and waved, forcing a reassuring smile. He turned away, his small shoulders hunched against the cold drizzle. The door closed, leaving only the sound of rain on the roof and Eleanor's coughing from her room. I went back to the kitchen, my heart heavy. On the table, a faint smear of oatmeal remained from where the bowl had been pushed. The plastic container David had sealed so tightly sat neatly on the counter. I stared at it for a long time. It was sealed too well, as if he were afraid the oatmeal might escape. I chuckled grimly to myself. What am I thinking? Oatmeal doesn't have wings. But the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave me. I opened the container. The cool steam rose, still smelling of cinnamon, but there was also a faint, acrid scent, like medicine. It was barely there. If you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. I leaned in closer. The smell was more distinct. My heart pounded. I quickly put the lid back on, as if afraid of touching something I shouldn't. I leaned against the sink, taking a deep breath. People say desperate times call for desperate measures, but I wasn't desperate. I was scared. Scared of that strange smell, of Leo's reaction, of David's expression when he stopped my hand and when he was so eager to take our son to school. I turned on the faucet and washed my hands, the cold water numbing my fingers. I had to keep a clear head. My own mother used to say, better safe than sorry. But how could you be safe when you lived under the same roof, eating from the same pot? I started scanning the kitchen like someone searching for a needle in a haystack. I didn't tear things apart. I just observed the things usually overlooked: the cabinet under the sink, the spice drawer, the trash can. I checked the trash first. Inside were onion peels, ginger skins, and the small plastic bags from ground meat. Nothing unusual. I pulled out the top layer of trash, searching carefully. Still nothing. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I scolded myself. Then I answered, "If I don't save myself, who will?" I pulled open the spice drawer. Salt, pepper, sugar, everything was in its place. I touched each jar. They were all dry. I looked at the corner of the counter where David usually kept his odds and ends. It was neat, unusually so, as if someone had just wiped away all traces of something. I remembered something from about a week ago, in this very kitchen. I had come home early and found David making soup. His back was turned, and he was shielding the pot with his hand as he quickly poured something from a small packet into it. "What are you adding?" I had asked. He jumped. "It's just salt. You act like I'm casting a spell." I had laughed it off. Who would think ill of their own family? But now, that memory returned, sharp as a shard of glass. Eleanor coughed again, a long, rattling fit. I rushed to her room. She was sitting up, her face contorted in discomfort, rubbing her chest. I supported her back and whispered, "Where does it hurt, Eleanor? Let me take you to the doctor." She wheezed. "A doctor? It's too expensive. It's probably just the oatmeal from this morning. It was too strong." I didn't argue. With the elderly, the fear of being a burden is often greater than the fear of illness. I just nodded, wiped her sweat with a warm cloth, and brought her a bowl of thin, soupy oatmeal I had made myself with water from the thermos so she could rinse the bitter taste from her mouth. She did as I asked, then lay back down, staring at the ceiling, utterly exhausted. I sat by her bed for a while, listening as her breathing evened out. Watching her lie there, I knew I couldn't afford to fall apart. Whatever was happening, she was the most vulnerable. If I panicked and said the wrong thing, the shock might be too much for her. I went back to the living room and checked the clock. Leo would be in class by now, and I was standing in the middle of my own home, feeling like a stranger in a strange land. I told myself, perhaps it's time to stop being naive. I made a simple but difficult decision. I would ask Leo directly, not to pressure him, but to understand the burden he was carrying. If I stayed silent, the fear would grow inside him first, then me. And for a child, prolonged fear can leave permanent scars. When Leo came home that afternoon, he stopped short the moment he saw me, his eyes darting around as if checking for someone else. I led him into my bedroom, where Eleanor was napping, and closed the door softly. I pulled up a chair and sat at his level, placing my hands on his small shoulders. This time, I didn't beat around the bush. I spoke softly, enunciating each word. "Leo, what did you see this morning?" Leo stood before me, his small hands twisting together. He looked down at his toes, his lips pressed tightly as if trying to swallow a lump in his throat. I recognized his fear. It wasn't the fear of being scolded, but of something larger, more ambiguous, yet heavy as stone. I lowered my voice even more, almost to a whisper. I'm asking you seriously. Just tell me what you saw. I won't be mad. I just need to know." He remained silent, his throat moving as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. I waited patiently, knowing that forcing him would only make him shut down. I gently rubbed his shoulders. After a moment, Leo burst into tears. It wasn't the loud wail of a child who had fallen, but the choked sobs of someone who had held it in for too long. He wiped his eyes with his fists, but the tears kept coming. "Mommy," he choked out, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "Don't tell Daddy, okay?" My heart clenched. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, I won't. I promise." Leo looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen, as if testing my promise. Then he looked down and whispered, "This morning, I saw Daddy put a little packet in your oatmeal." The words sent a chill through me, but I didn't let it show on my face. I asked slowly, as if asking about his day at school, "When did you see him do it?" "When he was scooping the oatmeal, his back was turned, and I was sitting right here," Leo said, pointing to his usual chair in the kitchen. "He got it from under the sink." "Under the sink. The cabinet." I nodded slightly, keeping my expression neutral. "What did the packet look like?" Leo sniffled. "It was tiny, like the sugar packets my teacher gives me with my milk, but it was white. Daddy tore it open, poured it in, and stirred it." The word stirred twisted something inside me. I kept asking, "Did you see him pour it into just your bowl, or the whole pot?" The pot," he sobbed, then rushed his words as if afraid I'd interrupt. "He did it really fast. He looked around and then hid the packet. I saw him." I paused for a few seconds. A part of me wanted to jump up, run to the kitchen, tear everything apart, and storm into David's workplace to confront him. But I was sitting here, in front of my crying, terrified 5-year-old son. They say anger makes you reckless. I couldn't afford to be reckless. I had to be smarter than my fear. I asked one more question, still gently. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" Leo hung his head. Daddy said I wasn't allowed to tell. He said if I told, he'd be mad and wouldn't take me to the park anymore." He sobbed again, then added in a whisper, "He said you worry too much, and if I told you, you would cry. He doesn't like it when you cry." My throat tightened. A man who uses the threat of his wife's tears to silence his own child, this was no longer about a marital spat. This was manipulation. I pulled Leo into my arms. He felt so small and light. I held him tighter, a mix of love and rage welling inside me. Rage at whom? I didn't even dare to name him in my head. "I'm not going to cry," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. "I just need you to tell me one more thing. Have you seen Daddy do this before?" Leo was quiet for a moment, then gave a tiny nod. He didn't want to say it, but he nodded. "When?" I asked. "The other day, when he made the soup. He put something in then, too." He looked at me, afraid of my reaction. I thought it was salt, but the packet looked the same. I took a deep breath. I knew I had to ask for specific details. A child's memory can be unreliable. "Do you remember where he got the packet from that time?" "From under there, too," Leo replied. "He bent down and got it really fast." "Did you ever see him put it in Grandma's food?" I asked, immediately regretting bringing her into it, but the question was out. Leo shook his head immediately. "No, I only ever saw him put it in your food." I squeezed him tighter. A door slammed shut in my mind. Why only my food? If it was just some harmless prank, why not put it in the whole pot for everyone? And if it was aimed at me, what was the goal? I didn't ask him about motives. A 5-year-old doesn't understand money, contracts, or the dark calculations of adults. All I needed was to ensure his safety first. I gently pushed him back and looked him straight in the eye. "Listen to me. From now on, if Daddy gives you anything to eat or drink when I'm not here, you tell him, 'I'll wait for Mommy to come home.' If he pushes you, you say it again. Do you understand?" Leo nodded quickly, as if grasping a lifeline. "And if he asks if you told me anything?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "You just say you went to school and played. Mommy will take care of everything else." Leo bit his lip. "Mommy, are you going to be okay?" That question pierced my heart. I wanted to say I was fine, to soothe his fears, but lying now felt like throwing a thin blanket over a fire. I told him the gentlest version of the truth. I'm a little tired, but I'm going to get better. Do you trust me? Leo nodded forcefully, tears still clinging to his eyelashes. I wiped them away and gave him a tissue. I didn't bribe him with candy. I comforted him with certainty. Because what children need most is the feeling that an adult is standing guard. I'm not mad at you, I said. What you did was because you love me. I know that. Leo looked at me, blinking, as if afraid I might disappear. He rested his head on my shoulder, and I felt his breathing slowly return to normal. I sat there, rubbing his back, my mind organizing everything into compartments. On one side, an ailing mother-in-law. On the other, a terrified son. And in the middle, the man I had called my husband for over a decade. They say a wise bird knows when to sing. Right now, I knew my wisdom had to be in knowing when to be silent. Not out of submission, but because I needed to survive, to protect my son, and to have solid proof in my hands before I opened my mouth. I hugged Leo one last time, then let him go. Go watch some cartoons, but keep the volume low. Don't wake Grandma. As he left, he glanced back at me one more time. I stood up, took a notebook from my drawer, and opened it to a fresh page. I didn't write a long story. I just jotted down the crucial points. Where Leo said his father got the packet, how he added it, the time, and one short sentence that sent a chill down my spine. Do not be rash. Get evidence. The moment the door closed behind Leo, I was no longer a woman who could only cry while holding her child. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Dark circles, pale lips, messy hair from sleepless nights. I told myself a hard truth. To understand people, you have to know when to be quiet. Quiet to listen, quiet to watch, and quiet to survive. I waited until I was sure Eleanor was fast asleep. If she heard me moving around, she would surely ask questions I couldn't answer, which would only make her worry and worsen her condition. I pulled her door almost shut, listened for her steady breathing, and then went back to the kitchen. The small room felt vast and empty. I felt lost. I opened the window to let in the damp, earthy smell of the rain. It was cold, but it cleared my head. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the small one above the sink. The narrow beam was just enough for someone working in secret. I stood before the sink. Beneath it was the damp wooden cabinet. The door was slightly warped and creaked when opened. I rarely touched it. It was just full of cleaning supplies and old plastic containers. But Leo was clear. His father bent down here. I crouched down and put my hand on the handle. Before opening it, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Don't tremble. If I trembled, I might drop something, move something out of place. The slightest change could arouse suspicion. The cabinet door creaked open. The smell of dampness and soap hit me. I scanned the contents one by one, careful not to disturb anything. The dish soap was on the left. A stack of plastic containers, a roll of trash bags, an old cardboard box. My eyes searched the deepest, darkest corner. There, wedged against the back wall, was a wadded-up piece of newspaper, deliberately pushed out of sight. I touched it gently. It was dry, not damp, which meant it hadn't been there long. I pulled it out as slowly as if I were removing a thorn. I unfolded the newspaper. Inside was a small, milky white plastic baggie containing a powder. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. All other sounds in the house seemed to fade, except for the soft patter of rain. I wanted to drop it, to throw it away and run, but that would leave me with no way out. I placed the baggie on a paper towel, avoiding direct contact. I didn't dare get too close to it. I just looked at the fine, off-white powder lying innocently in the bag. Something that looked so harmless to the naked eye could be a silent killer. The thought made my blood run cold. I took a clean stainless steel spoon, one I used to use for Leo's formula when he was a baby. I didn't use an everyday spoon for fear of leaving a trace. I opened the baggie carefully, not tearing the edge, and took out a tiny amount. It was so little that it would be hard to notice it was missing, but enough for a sample. I poured it into a small zip-top bag I had prepared. The bag sealed with a soft click that made me jump. I stood frozen, listening. No footsteps. Eleanor was still asleep. The house was quiet. On the bag, I wrote with a permanent marker, "Kitchen sample, 12:15 p.m." Only after I finished writing did my hands begin to shake. It was the kind of tremor that comes after you've done what you had to do. Sometimes, you have to be strong first and weak later. I sealed the original baggie, smoothing the edge. I rewrapped it in the newspaper, folding it along the original creases, and pushed it back into the exact same corner. I even carefully turned the dish soap bottle so the label faced forward, just as it was before. David was meticulous like that. He'd notice if anything was even slightly out of place. When I was done, I stood up and washed my hands with soap for a long time. It wasn't because they were dirty I had used a paper towel, but because a ghastly chill seemed to cling to my skin. I hid the sample bag deep inside the lining of a coat hanging at the back of my closet, a place David rarely touched. Then I sat down in the kitchen, looking at the cold pot and the clean table, and wondered how I had lived for so long without realizing there was a pit right at my feet. That evening, David came home earlier than usual. He walked in and glanced around, like someone checking for changes. I was mopping the floor and straightened up, pretending to be tired. "I have such a headache today. I think I'll go to the doctor tomorrow." He grunted, his voice flat, and looked toward Eleanor's room. "Is Mom sleeping?" "Yes, she's asleep," I replied, keeping my voice calm. He went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took out some meat to thaw. He didn't ask me what I wanted to eat, but he started cooking. A simple meal: vegetable soup, stewed pork, and fried eggs. Everything was easy to digest, the kind of meal one would cook for a sick person. On any other day, I might have been touched. But today, I felt like I was watching a play, and the actor was deeply in character. At dinner, he served me a bowl of rice and even placed a piece of stewed pork in it. "Eat up," he said. "You've been looking so pale lately." I looked at the meat. My stomach churned, not from hunger, but from fear. I couldn't eat it, but I couldn't refuse outright either. I faked a headache, wrinkling my brow. "I feel too nauseous. I think I'll just have some crackers and milk." David paused, his chopsticks hovering. He looked at me for longer than usual. It wasn't a look of concern. It was a calculating look. "You're feeling nauseous again?" he asked, his voice soft but insistent. "Should I make you some warm water?" I shook my head immediately. "No, it's okay. I can get it myself." He didn't argue. He just said okay and continued eating. But his lack of argument was even more unsettling. People with a guilty conscience are often jumpy, but those with a great guilt can be terrifyingly calm. I took some crackers from a jar I kept on a high shelf, a dry type that Leo liked. I broke off a small piece and chewed slowly, trying to act natural. I poured my own water from the thermos, not using a glass he offered. I remembered an old saying, "Love others as you love yourself, but love yourself first. If you can't protect yourself, you can't protect anyone." That night, after Leo was asleep, I lay beside him, my eyes wide open. David was on the other side of the bed, breathing evenly. I faced the wall, my hand on my son's back. That small, warm presence was the only thing keeping me from breaking down. I didn't cry. I just felt a deep, penetrating cold. The cold of someone who was beginning to understand that something was being hidden in my home, something more carefully guarded than money, and it was right under the sink where I washed my hands every day, a bitter, cruel joke. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I was diligent, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if I was one step too slow, I would once again be placing my life in someone else's hands. I waited for David to take Leo to school and for Eleanor to be asleep before I acted on the plan I had formulated during my sleepless night. The small sample bag, carefully hidden, was now tucked into the inner lining of my purse. I didn't put it with my wallet or phone to avoid it being seen if I had to rummage for something. I wore a dark coat, a hat, and a face mask, not for style, but so that if I ran into anyone I knew, they would just think I was trying to avoid spreading a cold to the elderly person at home. Susan's pharmacy was at the end of the main road, 2 turns from my street. I had known her since I worked at a grocery store years ago. She was a few years older than me, spoke softly, but was sharp and efficient. She was the kind of person who knew a lot but said little exactly who I needed. As I walked in, the mixed scent of antiseptic and herbal remedies filled the air. Susan looked up and frowned. "Sarah, you look terrible." I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice normal. "I'm a little under the weather. Do you have a minute to talk in private?" Susan glanced around, then nodded, gesturing for me to follow. She led me to the back room, where she kept her records and a small refrigerator for temperature-sensitive medicine. She pulled a curtain shut. "What is it? Speak quickly." I opened my purse, took out the small zip-top bag, and placed it on the table. My hand was shaking, no matter how hard I tried to stop it. I spoke directly, without embellishment. "I suspect there's something strange in my food at home. I managed to get a sample. I need to know what it is, but I don't want anyone to know I'm asking." Susan's expression darkened as she looked at the bag. She didn't open it. She just asked, "Where did you get this?" "In the kitchen," I answered. "Whose kitchen?" she pressed, her question as sharp as a razor. I paused, my mouth dry. Saying David's name felt like tearing down the last curtain of denial. But I was already here. "My husband's," I said, my voice soft but clear. Susan sighed and sat down. She looked at me for a long moment. "Sarah, let me be clear. I'm not the police, and this isn't a lab. I can only give you a general idea. But whatever you do, you have to do it right, so you have a solid case later on." I nodded repeatedly, desperate. Susan put on a pair of gloves. She didn't tear the bag open. She used scissors to cut a tiny slit at the edge and extracted a minuscule amount of the powder, placing it in a clean glass vial. As she worked, she spoke in a low, instructive tone. "From now on, treat everything as evidence. Don't touch anything with your bare hands, and don't confront him when you're alone at home. Some people, when cornered, don't just run, they fight back. Do you understand?" A chill ran down my spine. "Yes," I whispered. Susan performed a few simple tests, dissolving a bit of the powder in a solution and using a test strip. She didn't speak, her eyes fixed on the result. The longer she was silent, the harder my heart pounded. After a few minutes, she looked up, her voice low. "This appears to be a type of sedative, not something a person would normally have in their kitchen." My ears were ringing. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "A sedative? What does that mean?" Susan looked me straight in the eye. "It means in small doses, it makes you drowsy, lethargic, and your memory foggy. Long-term use leads to weakness. A stronger dose can be dangerous, especially for someone already frail." She paused, emphasizing each word. "And if someone is mixing this into your food without your knowledge, it is not an accident." That last sentence hit me like a hammer. I wanted to ask more, but my throat was tight. All I could manage was, "That's exactly how I've been feeling." Susan wrote a few short lines on a piece of paper. Not the specific drug name, but suspected sedative. Recommend professional lab testing. She signed it and handed it to me. "Take this, but remember, this is just a first step. For a real case, you need a proper lab result. I can recommend a place, but you have to decide." I clutched the thin piece of paper, which felt as heavy as a stone. My voice trembled. "What do I do now?" Susan's advice was practical, not poetic. "First, you survive. You have to cut off the source. Prepare your own food and drinks. If anything tastes or smells strange, throw it out. Don't be sentimental. Saving a plate of food could cost you your life, and you need someone you trust to hold on to your evidence. If you keep it all and something happens to you, it's all gone." My mind immediately flashed to Brenda, the woman who ran the coffee cart at the end of our street. She was a bit rough around the edges, but had a good heart. I tucked the paper into my wallet and asked the question I dreaded most. "Susan, do you think I should confront my husband?" She shook her head immediately. "No, not when you don't have enough to protect yourself. Confronting him now is like handing him the rope to hang you with. You have to be patient to catch the big fish." I left the pharmacy feeling like I was walking on clouds. Outside, life went on as usual. People were driving, buying breakfast, living their lives, completely unaware that in my purse was a small piece of paper that could change my entire world. When I got home, I went straight to my room. I washed my hands, changed my clothes, and put the paper in an envelope, which I hid at the bottom of my sewing box. From now on, I told myself, I had to live in this house like someone crossing a tightrope. One wrong step, and I would fall. That afternoon, when David came home, he asked, "Where were you this morning?" I had my answer ready. I went to the pharmacy to get more vitamins and cough medicine for Mom. And I was feeling so tired, I had my blood pressure checked. He grunted and looked me up and down. I maintained my weary expression. After all, my exhaustion was real. I didn't smile much or talk much. I was just quieter, the calmness of someone who has seen the abyss. That evening, I cooked a simple soup for Eleanor, making sure to taste it myself. I served her in front of me. As she ate, she said, "Sarah, dear, you shouldn't stay up so late. A woman's health is her treasure." I heard the bittersweet irony in her words and could only manage a quiet, "Yes, Mom." At dinner, David once again served me food, just like the night before. I didn't touch it. I'll just have some oatmeal and salt. My stomach is acting up. I made myself a small bowl of plain oatmeal, a pre-packaged kind I trusted, and ate that instead. It was a poor meal, but it tasted good because it was something I could control. David looked at my bowl. A flash of annoyance in his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. He didn't press me. He just asked, his voice deceptively light, "How are you going to get better if you keep eating like that?" "I'll get there," I replied. And in that moment, I knew I was living a double life. On the outside, the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law. On the inside, a mother building an invisible fence around her child, piece by painstaking piece. That night, as Leo slept, I sat on the edge of his bed and watched him. I didn't tell him what I had learned. A child shouldn't have to carry an adult's fear. I just kissed his forehead and whispered, "Mommy's here." Then I turned off the light. In the darkness, I could hear David's steady breathing on the other side of the bed. It was no longer the sound of a partner, but of someone I had to be wary of. And in my heart, a decision had taken root, firm and unshakable. I needed an ally. Not to fight a battle, but to ensure that if I fell, someone would know why. That morning, I chose a time when the house was quietest to go out. Eleanor was still resting, Leo was at school, and David had left for work. I locked the door carefully, the envelope tucked into my purse like a secret that could burn my life down. Brenda's coffee cart was at the mouth of our street. It was just a simple stainless steel cart, a big pot of coffee, and a basket of fresh pastries. But every morning, it was bustling. I had to pick the right moment to talk to her. When she saw me, Brenda squinted. "Sarah? What are you doing out and about? Shouldn't you be at home?" I gave a weak smile. "I need to ask you something, Brenda. Do you have a minute to talk privately?" Brenda looked me up and down. "You look pale as a ghost. You sick again?" "Fine. Come back here. Make it quick. I've got customers." She pulled me behind a small canvas screen where she kept her supplies. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and sugar. On any other day, it would have been comforting. Today, it just made my throat feel tight. I didn't waste time. I put the envelope on my lap. "Brenda, I need you to hold on to something for me. I'm afraid to keep it at home. I'm afraid one day it won't be there anymore." Brenda stopped wiping the counter and turned to face me. "What in the world are you talking about?" I told her the short version. My declining health, what Leo saw, the powder I found, the pharmacist's suspicion of a sedative, and my fear of confronting my husband alone with my mother-in-law and son in the house. When I finished, I realized my knuckles were white from gripping my purse. Brenda stood motionless for a moment, then muttered a curse under her breath. Her voice was low now, nothing like the booming one she used for customers. My God. A man would do that? Are you sure? I nodded. I'm not 100% sure of everything, but I'm sure enough that I can't eat or drink anything he gives me. I just need you to hold this. If something happens to me, at least people will know it wasn't an accident. Brenda looked at me with a mixture of pity and anger. She grabbed a thick plastic bag. "Give it here. I'll hide it." Then she added, "But you listen to me. Don't you go trying to be a hero and handle this alone. You need backup, you understand?" I opened the envelope and gave her the note from Susan and a small, sealed, zip-top bag with another sample. I didn't give her everything. I had learned to not put all my eggs in one basket. Brenda took it, glanced at it, and immediately sealed it in the plastic bag. She opened a container where she kept dry goods, took out an old cookie tin, and hid the bag at the bottom. "No one looks in here but me," she said. "And even if they did, who's gonna mess with a food vendor's supplies?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, but Brenda wasn't done. "So what's your next move? You can't just avoid him forever. He'll get suspicious." I hesitated, but she was now my lifeline. I had to tell her the rest. "I need clear proof. I need to catch him in the act of putting it in the food." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "You're going to film him?" "Honestly, I don't like the sound of it, but if you're going to do it, you do it clean. Get the footage, make a copy, and make sure he can't tell it was you." I nodded. I told her I had an old phone I planned to use. Brenda pursed her lips. "All right, but hide it somewhere good. If a man like that gets suspicious, he'll turn the house upside down." I asked her the question that had been weighing on me all night. "Brenda, if I do this, and he finds out, can you help me?" Brenda's eyes flashed. "I can tell how scared you are. Let me be straight with you. If things go bad, you run over here. I'm not rich, but I've got a voice, I've got legs, and I've got neighbors. You can't hide something this rotten forever." Her words made me want to cry, but they also made me feel stronger. I bowed my head. "Thank you, Brenda." She waved it off. "Don't thank me. Now go home before people start gossiping, and when you get there, you watch what you eat, and you watch that boy. A child is a weak spot. You protect Leo first." The mention of Leo made my chest ache. I stood up, pulled up my mask, and walked away. Brenda turned back to her customers, her voice booming again. "Hot coffee, fresh muffins here." To everyone else, it was a normal morning. To me, that normalcy felt precious, something worth fighting for. Back home, the first thing I did was check everything: the doors, the locks, the windows. Everything was as I left it, but I no longer trusted in appearances. I washed my hands, changed, and took out my old phone. The battery was weak, but it could still record. I charged it, turned off the ringer and vibration, cleared all notifications, and set it to airplane mode. I prepared it like someone studying for an exam where failure meant death. When Leo came home that afternoon, he ran and hugged me, but his embrace was gentle, as if he were afraid of hurting me. I picked him up and kissed his hair. "Did you have fun at school today?" He nodded, then whispered in my ear, "Mommy, are you okay?" I looked into his eyes and didn't say much. I just answered, "I'm okay, but you remember what I told you. You don't eat or drink anything Daddy gives you unless I'm there. Got it?" Leo nodded firmly, as serious as a grown man. I stroked his cheek, my heart aching with love and sorrow. A child should be worried about choosing a toy, not vetting his food. That night, David came home late. As he walked in, the faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume wafted past me. "How's Mom?" he asked. "She's coughing a little less, but still tired," I replied. He washed his hands and went to the kitchen, opening the fridge out of habit. I stood near Leo, pretending to organize his toys, but my eyes were on David's every move. He was quiet, but it was no longer the quiet of a gentle man. It was the quiet of secrecy. I cooked dinner, taking control of the meal. I served Eleanor's soup, dished out food for Leo, and then sat down. David watched me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before he looked down and started eating. During the meal, I made small talk. The teacher praised Leo. I bought some new pain relief cream for Eleanor's arthritis. Work was busy. I talked to fill the silence, to hide my own tension. David just grunted and said, "I see." After dinner, I washed the dishes as usual, but this time my mind was sharp. I didn't ask questions. I didn't probe. I just observed, remembered, and kept myself from making a single mistake. As the saying goes, man plans, God laughs. But I didn't know what God had in store. I only knew I had to plan for myself first. That night, after everyone was asleep, I took out the old phone. I found a spot in the kitchen, tested the angle, and then quickly turned it off. I didn't leave it out. I hid it in a place only I would know, amongst the most mundane of objects where no one would ever think to look. I lay down next to Leo. He turned and wrapped his arm around mine, sleeping more soundly than he had in days. I stared at the dark ceiling, listening to the rain. The panic in my heart had subsided, replaced by a deliberate silence, like someone holding their breath to swim through a whirlpool. I woke while it was still dark. The rain had stopped, but a chill lingered on the floor tiles. I lay still for a moment, listening to Leo's steady breathing and Eleanor's soft coughs before I slowly sat up. Today was the day I was placing my bet. Not to test my husband's heart. A broken heart is not worth testing, but to get something solid, something that, if anyone ever asked, I could present without a word. The proof is in the pudding. Sometimes, that phrase can save a life. I crept down to the kitchen. The first thing I did was check the old phone. Battery full, airplane mode on, no sound, no vibration. I didn't put it in an obvious place. I wedged it behind a large spice jar, the camera lens aimed at the cabinet under the sink and the stove area. From the outside, it just looked like a cluttered shelf. After setting it up, I went back upstairs and lay down, feigning deep exhaustion. Luckily, the exhaustion was real. A little after 6, David woke up. He came downstairs, his voice a low rumble. "You ate so little yesterday. I'll make you some oatmeal this morning." I sighed, pretending to be weak. "Yes, my head feels so heavy. Could you make it with ginger, like last time? I'll try to eat a little." He agreed immediately, so quickly that there wasn't a hint of hesitation. He went into the kitchen. I didn't follow. I just cracked my bedroom door open, just enough to hear, and let the camera do its work. The sound of the fridge opening, a pot being placed on the stove, water running, all normal sounds. But I knew what I was waiting for wasn't in those sounds. A moment later, I heard the soft creak of the cabinet under the sink. I held my breath. Then, the faint, crisp sound of paper tearing. I couldn't see it, but I pictured Leo's small, cold hand and his words. He got it from under the sink. The oatmeal started to bubble. The sound of a spoon stirring, mixing something that was more than just oats and water. I closed my eyes for a second, not out of fear, but to keep myself focused. If I ran out there screaming now, I would lose everything. "Sarah," David called, "come down and eat while it's hot." I walked downstairs slowly, my hand on the wall as if I were dizzy. He was standing by the stove, his face grim. He ladled the oatmeal into a bowl and set it on the table. The steam rose, thick with the scent of ginger. He pushed the bowl toward me, his voice a little sharp but trying to be gentle. "Sit down, eat, and get better." I sat down. I looked at the bowl but didn't touch the spoon right away. I was trying to read his reaction. He stood by the table, not sitting down to eat with me as usual. He was watching me, not with concern, but with expectation. I picked up the spoon and stirred it lightly. "You put a lot of ginger in. It smells strong," I said, as if complimenting him. "Yeah," he replied. "Now eat. Stop talking." His words, "stop talking," sent a chill down my spine. I brought the spoon toward my mouth, then stopped, wrinkling my face. "Oh, I feel sick. I think it's because I slept so poorly." He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, his voice lower but the pressure in it mounting. "Just have a little. I'll feed you." He picked up the spoon. I immediately recoiled, forcing a weak smile. No, I can do it myself. You'll make me more nauseous." He froze for half a second. I saw the flash of frustration in his eyes before he quickly concealed it. He put the spoon down. "Fine, then eat. It works best when it's hot." I nodded, pretending to blow on it, and scooped up a spoonful. But I didn't put it in my mouth. I just touched it to my lips, then immediately covered my mouth as if I were about to be sick. "Oh, I can't." David shot up. "What's wrong? Do you need some water?" I shook my head, clutching my stomach. "No, I just need the bathroom." I walked quickly to the bathroom but didn't lock the door. I just stood inside, taking deep breaths to calm myself. I knew I couldn't drag this out for too long. I splashed some water on my face and walked out, rubbing my forehead like a person on the verge of fainting. David was still waiting. He looked at the nearly full bowl, his voice turning cold. "What kind of eating is that?" I tried to look weak. "I'll eat it. Just give me a minute. I'm so dizzy." The moment he turned to get a towel from the kitchen, I slipped my hand into my coat pocket and pulled out a small vial I had prepared an empty, cleaned-out vitamin bottle. I quickly scooped a small amount of the oatmeal into it and sealed the lid. The motion was so swift and silent that even I was surprised my hands weren't shaking. I tucked the vial into the bottom of my purse, which was hanging on a nearby chair, and zipped it up. David came back with the towel. "Wipe your face, then eat." I took it, dabbed my face, and then took one tiny spoonful into my mouth. I swallowed. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to maintain the act. The hot oatmeal slid down my throat. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my heart was racing. I took one more spoonful and then put the spoon down. I'm full. I'll finish it later." David stared at me, his eyes trying to see through me. He said nothing more. He just cleared his own place he hadn't eaten and poured the rest of the oatmeal from the pot into a container, sealing it tightly again. That meticulous sealing made my throat ache. I took my purse and went to my room. I sat on the bed, waiting for him to leave. The moment the front door closed, I let out a sharp breath, like someone who had just surfaced for air. I immediately went back to the kitchen and retrieved the old phone. My hand trembled as I opened the video file. The image was brutally clear. On the screen, David bent down, reached into the cabinet under the sink, pulled out the small packet, tore it open, poured it into the pot, and stirred. Every action was quick, precise, and confident. He moved like a man who had done this many times before. After watching it, I didn't cry. I just felt an icy coldness spread from the back of my neck down my spine. It was so cold that I had to wrap my arms around myself. Around noon, I took the oatmeal sample to Susan, just as discreetly as before. She looked at the sample, then at me. She didn't ask many questions. She just said, "You did the right thing. Label it with the date and time." That afternoon, she called me to the corner of the counter, her voice very low. "This sample is consistent with the first one, but the indicators are stronger this time. Sarah, you have to be careful. This isn't just about feeling tired anymore." I took the new report she gave me, my palm cold and clammy. I didn't say, "I know." That would have been pointless. I just nodded, thanked her, and went home, looking like any other woman returning from an errand. On the way, I stopped by Brenda's coffee cart to buy a muffin for Eleanor. As I paid, I said softly, "I have more." Brenda gave me a look. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded, understanding that things had just escalated. Back home, I didn't go straight to the kitchen. I went to my room, washed my hands, changed my clothes, and filed the new report away with the first one. I told myself, from now on, I had to live in this house like someone walking through a minefield. One wrong step, and everything would explode. That afternoon, David came home and asked, "Where did you go today?" I had my answer ready. I went out to get some fresh air, and I bought some new ginger tea for Mom. He grunted, looking me over. I maintained my exhausted facade, because my exhaustion was very real. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't talking much. I was just calmer, the calm of a person who has seen the pit that lies before them. That night, I was still the one to cook. I still served Eleanor's soup. I still took Leo to brush his teeth. I was still the dutiful wife in front of others, but inside me, a map had been drawn. And I knew that from this day forward, I no longer had the right to be naive. I only had the right to live and the right to protect my son at any cost. With the video from the kitchen, I no longer allowed myself to just wait and see. I began to operate on a simple principle. What I couldn't control, I avoided. Who I couldn't trust, I watched. It sounds cold, but when you've seen the abyss at your feet, you lose your innocence. I set a new rule for Leo, phrasing it simply, like a warning about a hot stove. You are not to go into the kitchen alone, and you are not to accept any food or drinks from Daddy when Mommy isn't here. When he asked why, I just said, "Listen to me. Mommy will handle it. A child needs certainty, not a lecture." David continued his performance, asking after Eleanor, reminding her to take her medicine, coming and going on schedule, his face the picture of a concerned family man. The only difference was that whenever I took the initiative to cook or pour drinks, he would watch me for a moment longer than usual. It wasn't a look of concern, it was a look of assessment, like someone afraid of losing control. One morning, as he was rushing to leave, he bent down to tie his shoes, and his phone slipped out of his pocket, clattering on the floor. He picked it up, annoyed at the delay, placed it hastily on the shoe rack, and dashed out. The moment the door closed, I stood frozen for a few seconds. I glanced toward Eleanor's room. She was still resting. Leo was on the floor, building with his blocks, his back to me. "Stay in your room and play, honey." "Mommy's going to change," I told him. He ran off. I picked up David's phone. My hand was ice cold, but the phone was warm from his pocket. I didn't try to guess a random password. I thought of the one thing I hated to think about: Leo's birthday. I typed it in. The screen unlocked. In that moment, I understood that unlocking a phone can be like opening a tomb. I went straight to his messages. There was a name I didn't recognize: Jessica. I opened the conversation. The words on the screen were like a slap to the face. "Jessica, was yesterday's dose too strong?" "David, not yet. We need to increase it a little more. She has to be weak to be compliant." "Jessica, I'm scared it will be discovered." "David, she trusts me. Once she's completely out of it, we're done." I scrolled up and saw another exchange that made my heart stop. "Jessica, does the kid notice anything?" "David, he's just a boy. We'll deal with him later." I heard myself swallow. Deal with him later. Those 4 words were not spoken in anger. They were part of a plan. They say you should always maintain a level of dignity. At that moment, I only told myself, "Stay calm. You have to protect your son." I didn't take screenshots on his phone. I used my own phone to take pictures of the most damning messages. Then I exited the app, locked the screen, and placed the phone back exactly where it was. I even wiped it with a dry tissue, a habit from cleaning, to remove any fingerprints. When I was done, I washed my hands. The water was cold, but my head felt hot, as if someone were pressing coals against my forehead. After dropping Leo at school, I went to Brenda's cart, pretending to buy a muffin for Eleanor. As I paid, I said just one sentence: "I have the texts." Brenda gave me a slight nod, no questions asked. In our small community, too many questions would attract attention. Back home, I handled the photos of the texts like they were evidence in a high-stakes trial. I renamed the image files to something innocuous, moved them to a hidden, password-protected folder in my Notes app, and even copied the 2 most important sentences into my notebook using a private code in case something happened to my phone. It seemed old-fashioned, but it was safe. I also prepared a message to Brenda with the 2 photos, ready to send at a moment's notice, after which I would delete it from my own device. When David came home that evening, he asked casually, "Did I forget my phone this morning?" "I didn't see it," I replied calmly. "You probably left it somewhere." He gave me a quick, searching look, then went to his room to change. His silence told me that from now on, any mistake would have a price. That night, he came home with a can of nutritional supplement powder and placed it on the table. "I bought this for you, to get your strength back," he said, his voice gentle, like a caring husband. I looked at the can, my stomach tightening, but my face remained neutral. "Thank you. I'll ask the doctor if it's right for me." He frowned. "It's just a supplement." I gave a faint smile. "My stomach has been sensitive. I don't want to upset it and cause more trouble while Mom is sick." He said no more, but his eyes swept over me like a blade. At dinner, Eleanor asked, "Why are you 2 so quiet lately?" I just smiled politely, served her a piece of fish, and poured her some warm water. I didn't want her to bear the pain of choosing sides. After dinner, Leo came over, gave me a quick look, and then went to brush his teeth. I stroked his hair. "As long as you're a good boy, Mommy's happy," I said. He nodded. That night, I lay next to him, listening to David tapping on his phone in the living room. The sound was no longer harmless. It was the sound of calculations, where each number could represent something else: dignity, life, or the future of a child. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. In my mind, only one task remained, clearer than ever. That insurance policy, who was it really protecting? I didn't schedule the meeting with Mr. Evans, the lawyer, in a hurry. I chose a time during my lunch break when David would be at the warehouse and couldn't just drop by home. I didn't bring the entire bulky folder, which would look like I was preparing for a lawsuit. I only took the most important pages, clipped inside a plastic sleeve, looking like nothing more than paperwork for a leave of absence. Before I left, I made soup for Eleanor. "I'll be back soon, Mom. I just have a small errand to run." She looked at me. "Are you going for more medicine?" I just smiled. "No, just sorting out some paperwork. It's nothing." Lying to her felt like a needle in my heart. But sometimes, telling the truth to the wrong person is self-sabotage. The lawyer's office was on the second floor of an old building. The office itself wasn't fancy, but it was neat. Mr. Evans was about David's age, articulate, with sharp, observant eyes, the kind of person who reads documents more carefully than he reads people. "You must be Sarah," he said. "Susan gave me a call. You needed some advice on an insurance contract." I nodded. I didn't pour out my marital problems. I stuck to the facts. "Yes, I wanted to review this policy. I didn't pay close attention when I signed it, and now I have some concerns." I handed him the documents, trying to keep my hand steady. Mr. Evans flipped through the pages. He read quickly but thoroughly. He stopped at one page and circled something with his pen. "When did you sign this?" "About 2 months ago," I replied. He nodded and continued reading. After a moment, he put his pen down and looked at me directly. "Sarah, let me ask you this. Did you take out this insurance policy for yourself or for your son?" I hesitated. My husband said it was for me, to protect our son. If I got sick, there would be money for treatment. If something happened to me, Leo would have a safety net. Mr. Evans didn't smile. He pushed the paper toward me and pointed with the tip of his pen. "Then look at this line." I leaned forward. The words were printed in bold. "Beneficiary, David Miller." My head started to spin. I read it again and again, thinking my eyes were deceiving me. But the name remained, cold and unmoving. My voice was hoarse. "Shouldn't the beneficiary be my son?" Mr. Evans shook his head. "No. If you wanted your son to be the beneficiary, his name would have to be here. Here, your husband is the primary beneficiary. You are merely the insured person." I sat in silence. My throat was tight, but I forced myself to ask, because ambiguity now was a death sentence. "So if something happens to me, the money goes to him?" Mr. Evans nodded. "In principle, yes. The primary beneficiary receives the payout. And one more thing," he said, pointing to another section. "Look at the payout amount. It increases over time. The more regularly you pay the premiums, the more valuable the policy becomes for the beneficiary." I gripped my purse. I remembered David urging me to pay the premiums on time, his voice so reasonable. "Don't be late, or you'll lose the benefits." It turned out the benefits weren't for my son. They were for him. Mr. Evans pointed out a few other clauses about pre-existing conditions and the formal process for changing a beneficiary. He explained the complex document in simple, clear terms. I swallowed hard. Why would someone set up a policy like this? Mr. Evans looked at me for a moment and spoke frankly. "I don't know the situation in your home, but on paper, the beneficiary is your husband, not your son. And if you are currently experiencing unusual health problems, I would advise you not to treat this as a simple matter of paperwork." I lowered my head. All the disparate pieces suddenly clicked into place. The oatmeal, the powder, the video, the texts, the dropped note. They all pointed to one thing: money. "What do I do now?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I don't want to cause a scene. I have my mother-in-law and my son to think about." Mr. Evans took a piece of paper and wrote down 3 points. First, preserve and back up all your evidence chronologically: video, texts, sample reports. Second, ensure your personal safety at all costs. Do not eat anything you don't control, and do not confront him alone. Third, prepare an exit strategy: your personal documents, cash, a trusted contact, and if necessary, be ready to report this to the authorities when you have sufficient grounds. He added, "Remember, your evidence must tell a story. What was collected when, who witnessed it, where it's stored. That's what makes it credible. Don't wait until you're in danger to run. That's when you trip." I nodded. His words were a lifeline, pulling me out of the emotional pit that was threatening to swallow me. Before I left, he said one more thing I'll never forget. "Sarah, in family matters, people often value keeping the peace. But when someone in your family starts treating you like an asset, your safety and your son's safety must become your #1 priority." I walked down the stairs feeling like I was floating. The sun was out, the traffic was loud, but I felt like I was moving through a cold fog. I didn't cry. Crying would make me soft, and being soft now meant losing. I just clutched the folder, holding on to the last shreds of my composure. When I got home, the first thing I saw was Eleanor, rubbing her knee. "Are you back, dear?" she asked. I said yes, and brought her a glass of warm water, my voice as respectful as ever. She was innocent in all of this. I went to my room, locked the door, and took out my notebook. I didn't write down my feelings. I wrote down a plan: 1 copy of the evidence for Brenda, 1 for the lawyer, 1 for me to keep hidden. I also took pictures of the key pages of the insurance policy, renaming the files to look like utility bills. Only then did I sit down and let out a long breath. I remembered something my own mother used to say. In life, never expect someone to love you as much as you love them. I never used to believe it. Now, I did. The price of that lesson was hanging over my head. That afternoon, when David came home, he was his usual calm self. "Where did you go at lunchtime?" I looked at him. Inside, I was a different person, but on the outside, I played my part. I went to check on the insurance paperwork to see if anything else was needed. He flinched, just for a second, then asked, "And?" I smiled faintly. "Nothing. They said as long as the payments are on time, everything is fine." He grunted and went to wash his hands. I watched him go, a clear thought in my mind. I was no longer asking why he was doing this. I knew why. And now that I knew, I had only one path: protect my son, protect myself, and protect the evidence. Until the wicked paid the price for what they had sown. I didn't take Leo away that morning. It would have been too obvious. If David saw me leaving with our son, looking distraught, he would immediately become suspicious. I took Leo to school as always, waved goodbye at the gate, and told him to be a good boy, just like any other mother. The only difference was that I left the school not with a sense of peace, but with a plan already in motion. At noon, I went to Brenda's coffee cart. I didn't talk for long. I just asked her to step behind the cart and lowered my voice. "Brenda, can I leave Leo with you this afternoon? I'll tell David he's playing with a neighbor's cousin to give Mom some quiet." Brenda looked at me, not asking why, but asking the important question. "You're trying to get him out of the house?" I nodded. "I'm afraid something might happen." Brenda pursed her lips. "Okay. But if you're leaving him, pack everything he needs. You don't want to have to go back for anything. Going back is a bad move." I took her advice. That afternoon, I went home, cooked dinner, and cared for Eleanor. Everything by the book. I carefully packed a bag for Leo, a few sets of clothes, his cough medicine, his favorite small pillow, all in an old tote bag that looked more like a playdate bag than an escape bag. That evening, while David was in the shower, I sat with Eleanor and casually brought up the topic. "Mom, Brenda down the street has her nephew visiting. I was thinking of letting Leo play over there tomorrow afternoon to get him out of the house. What do you think?" Eleanor didn't suspect a thing. "Yes, that's a good idea. He gets bored cooped up in here." The next morning, I picked Leo up from school a little early and took him to Brenda's. He looked at me with understanding in his eyes. I just gave him a small wink. He didn't ask questions. He just took his bag and followed me. At Brenda's, she pulled Leo inside and gave him a mug of hot chocolate. She ruffled his hair. "You're staying with Auntie Brenda for a few days, okay? I've got cookies." Leo nodded, but his eyes were still on me. I knelt and hugged him, whispering, "You be good here. Mommy will come visit. Remember what I told you." Leo suddenly gripped my collar, his voice tiny. "Mommy, don't go back alone." My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. "I know how to be smart, sweetie." I walked back home, my heart pounding. As soon as I was inside, my phone rang. It was David. "Where's Leo?" he asked immediately. No greeting. "I let him go play at Brenda's. He's been begging for days," I replied. "Play? It's so sudden. His voice was hard. Brenda's nephew is in town. The kids wanted to play together. I'll pick him up this evening. He was silent for a few seconds. Then his tone softened, like he was trying to coax me. Sarah, don't let him stay there too long. You know Brenda. She talks a lot. I don't want people gossiping. I knew then he wasn't worried about gossip. He was worried about losing his leverage. Okay, I'll get him soon, I said. An hour later, he called again, his voice sharper. Are you home? I forgot some papers. I'm here, I said. What do you need? The insurance folder. I need to look at it. I took a breath. It's filed with Leo's birth certificate. I didn't want to misplace it. When you get home, I'll give it to you. He grunted and hung up. I stood there, feeling like a key had just turned in a lock. He was getting anxious. He was starting to retrace his steps, which meant he sensed something was wrong. I immediately backed up the evidence again. I copied the video and text images to a flash drive, along with a photo of the beneficiary page from the policy. I sealed the drive in a plastic baggie and hid it in the lining of the coat at Brenda's. I also created a new, secondary email account and sent the files to myself. I took the emergency cash I had saved and put it in my purse, not because I was planning to run, but because I didn't want to be empty-handed if I had to. David came home early that afternoon. His eyes scanned the living room and then landed on me. Where's Leo? He's at Brenda's. I was just about to go get him. Go now, he said flatly. I feigned surprise. Why? He just got there. His voice was low but firm. I said, go get him now. Eleanor, who was sitting nearby, looked up. What's the fuss, David? Let the boy play. David immediately softened his voice in front of his mother. I just don't want him to be a bother, and I miss him. I wanted to laugh at the word miss. He wanted Leo back not out of love, but because Leo was my weakness, a pawn he wanted to keep on the board. I didn't go right away. I'll get him after dinner. It's getting cold out. David's eyes darkened. Are you being stubborn? I kept my voice soft. I'm not being stubborn. I'm thinking of him, and Mom is tired. I don't want to worry her by running in and out. He fell silent, but it was a heavy silence. I knew I had bought myself some time, but I had also touched a nerve. That night, he barely ate. He went outside to take a phone call, his voice low and urgent. Later, as I lay in bed, he came into the room, his voice suddenly gentle. Sarah, let's bring Leo home tomorrow. I was thinking of taking him to the zoo this weekend. He added, Don't be so stressed. You've been tired. I'm worried about you. I didn't answer. His worry now sounded like a silken cloth being draped over my mouth. I closed my eyes but didn't sleep. I thought of Leo, probably sleeping more peacefully at Brenda's. I thought of Eleanor, having to live in a house full of secrets. And I thought of David, changing his tone like a street vendor changing his prices. I knew one thing. When a predator gets desperate, he gets reckless. And when he got reckless, I had to be sure my son was somewhere safe. I decided I couldn't keep Leo at Brenda's any longer. Not because I wanted to risk it, but because David's desperation was becoming dangerous. I still had Eleanor to protect at home. The next afternoon, I went to Brenda's cart. I have to bring Leo home, I said quietly, at least for now. But I need you to be on standby. Brenda frowned. Bringing him back is a risk. I know, I said. That's why I need you. If something goes wrong, I'll text you a code phrase. When you see it, you call for help immediately. No questions asked. Brenda nodded grimly. All right. What's the phrase? If I text you, Brenda, I forgot the coffee filters, it means I'm in trouble. Brenda gave a wry, sad smile. Figures. The coffee lady becomes the 911 dispatcher. She brought Leo out. He ran to me and hugged me tight. I knelt down. When we get home, you stick with me. You don't go anywhere alone with Daddy. Remember? He nodded, his face serious. We walked home slowly, hand in hand. The familiar street seemed menacing today. When we got to the door, I opened it to the smell of Eleanor's pain relief cream. She was so happy to see us. Leo, you're back! Did you have fun? David came home right at that moment. His eyes swept past me and locked on Leo. It wasn't the look of a father who missed his son. It was the look of a man checking that his property had been returned. A second later, his face changed, and he put on his model father voice. "Hey, buddy, you back? Were you good at Auntie Brenda's?" Leo hid behind me. I gently pushed him forward. "Say hi to Daddy." David turned to me, his voice softer than the day before. "It's good you brought him home early. It's not right for him to be at other people's houses all the time." He went into the kitchen and started making a show of cooking. "Mom, I'll make you some hot soup. It'll warm you up." Eleanor beamed with pride. I watched him, silent. His kindness today was more chilling than his anger. I didn't let him control the meal. I quietly made a separate, small pot of oatmeal for Eleanor, using ingredients I had just bought. At the table, I served Eleanor and Leo first. David pushed a bowl of the soup he had made toward me. "Eat this. It has ginger. It will help." I looked at the bowl. I didn't touch it. "I'll just have some plain rice. My stomach is still upset." He frowned. "How are you going to get better if you keep eating like that?" "My body knows what it needs," I said softly but firmly. "I can't afford to get sick while I'm taking care of Mom." David fell silent. He didn't push it further in front of his mother, but I saw his jaw tighten. That night, after Leo was asleep, I sent Brenda a simple text. "Hey Brenda, I'll swing by for some muffins for Mom tomorrow." It was our all-clear signal. I lay down next to Leo, holding him closer than usual. In the darkness, I could hear David's even breathing. It was no longer a sound of peace, but a rhythm I had to watch, a beat I had to stay ahead of. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe slowly and deeply. I didn't need to win with a shout. I needed to win with my wits. Because when someone has sown a storm in your own home, the only thing you can do is stand firm and wait for them to reap it. That afternoon, the sky was a gloomy gray. Eleanor wasn't eating much. She sat in the living room while I told Leo to color quietly at the table beside her. David came home early and paced around, looking at his watch. I didn't ask why. I just went about my business, preparing hot water and ginger tea for Eleanor, acting like a normal, attentive daughter-in-law. Just before dusk, a car pulled up outside. It wasn't a neighbor's. David shot up, smoothed his hair, and went to the door. I knew then that this wasn't just a colleague dropping by. The door opened. A woman walked in, stylishly dressed, carrying a designer handbag. It was Jessica. Her eyes did a quick scan of the room, lingering for a moment on Eleanor. "Mom, this is Jessica, a business partner," David said, his voice overly cheerful. "She was just dropping off some papers." Jessica smiled. "Hello. It's so nice to meet you. David told me you haven't been well, so I brought a little something." She placed a beautifully wrapped gift on the table. Eleanor was surprised but polite. "Oh, you shouldn't have. Please, sit down." I stood up. "Hello. Please, have a seat. I'll get you some water." Jessica's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Hello. You must be Sarah." I poured tea for Eleanor. David then turned to me. "Sarah, Jessica doesn't like ginger tea. Just get her some warm water." I nodded. David followed me into the kitchen, his voice low. "Just use the thermos. Don't make a fuss." He then bent down near the sink, his back shielding the cabinet from view. It was the same hunched posture that always set my teeth on edge. Just then, Leo toddled into the kitchen. He tugged on my shirt and stood on his tiptoes to whisper in my ear, his breath coming in short gasps. "Mommy, Daddy has the packet." My heart plummeted, but my face remained a mask. I just stroked his head. "Go sit with Grandma, sweetie." I turned on the faucet, the sound of the running water covering any other small noises. David straightened up, holding a kettle. He poured water into 3 glasses on a tray. "Here, take this out," he said. I didn't move immediately. I adjusted a towel, buying a few seconds to look at his eyes. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the tray, as if the only thing that mattered was its delivery. I carried the tray out and placed the glasses on the table. One for Eleanor, one for Jessica, and one for myself. "Drink up," David said. "It's good for you, Sarah. You've been so weak." Jessica picked up her glass, then put it down. "Thank you, but I just had coffee." David shot her a look. Eleanor reached for her glass. "Well, I'll have some." I panicked. David immediately pushed the glass closer to her. "Yes, Mom, drink up. I made it for you. He just wanted someone to drink it." I had to act. I stood up abruptly, pretending to be dizzy. My arm accidentally swept across the tray. Eleanor's glass tipped, spilling water across the table before crashing to the floor. Clang! Eleanor cried out. Leo yelped and hid behind me. Jessica jumped to her feet. I rushed to Eleanor's side. "Oh my God, Mom, are you okay?" "I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy." David didn't check on his mother. He stormed over to me, his face red with fury. "What is wrong with you, Sarah? What kind of game are you playing?" His voice was raw, the gentle facade completely gone. I looked up at him, my own pretense falling away. I spoke each word clearly. It wasn't an accident. I did it on purpose. The room went silent. What did you say?" Eleanor stammered. I turned to her, my voice softening. "Mom, please don't drink that water. Just trust me this one time." I looked back at David. "David, what were you trying to make me drink?" He scoffed. "Are you paranoid? It's just warm water." "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "Then you drink it." I picked up one of the remaining glasses and pushed it toward him. "You're so worried about me. Drink it first, to put my mind at ease." David froze. His hand started to move, then stopped. He glanced at Jessica. She immediately jumped in. "Sarah, don't be dramatic. David is a good husband." I turned to her with a cold smile. "A business partner who knows just the right dose to use." Jessica's face went white. Eleanor started to tremble. "Dose? What are you two talking about?" I helped her sit down, then took out my phone. My hand was steady now. "Mom, I'm sorry I hid this from you, but I was afraid for you and for Leo." "Put the phone down, Sarah," David snarled. I took a step back, shielding Leo behind me. "You stay right there. One more step, and I'm calling the police." "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. I played the video from the kitchen. The screen showed him clear as day, taking the packet, pouring it in the pot. I showed it to Eleanor, her face drained of color. "David, what did you do?" she whispered. "Don't listen to her, Mom. She spied on me." "I spied to find out who was trying to kill me in my own home," I shot back. I then showed her the screenshots of the texts. I didn't have to read them all. Just 2 lines were enough. "Increase it a little more. She has to be weak, and we'll deal with him later." Eleanor burst into silent, racking sobs. Jessica stammered, You just what?" I cut her off. "You just happened to ask if the dose was too strong out of friendly concern?" David slammed his fist on the table. "Enough! What do you get out of this?" "I get to live," I said, my voice like ice, "and my son gets to live." He laughed, a guttural, ugly sound. "Live? You think you can walk away from this?" "I control the money, the house. You have nothing." "You have the money," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "But I have the truth, and the truth is on this phone, and in the copies I've already sent to other people. You can break this one. It won't matter." That stopped him. For one single critical second, he was afraid. Not because he was wrong, but because he had lost control. He lunged for the phone. Leo screamed, "Don't hurt Mommy," and clung to my leg. Eleanor stumbled forward, crying, "David, no!" I stepped back and hit the call button. I wasn't bluffing. As the phone began to ring, David froze. Jessica collapsed into a chair. Eleanor sobbed, repeating her son's name over and over. And I stood there, shielding my son, with only one thought in my mind. I don't need pity. I need justice. The phone connected. I barely got out my address and the words, "Someone has been poisoning my food," before the front door burst open. It was Brenda, followed by 2 plainclothes police officers and our neighborhood watch captain. "I'm Sarah," I said, my voice clear. "This is my husband, David, and this is Jessica, the woman he was texting about the dose. I have video evidence and lab reports." David started shouting that I was crazy, that I was imagining things. But the officer just calmly said, "Sir, we'll follow the evidence." I showed them everything. Brenda spoke up. "Sarah gave me copies to hold on to days ago. She was afraid he would destroy them." That was when David's face truly went pale. The officers asked me where the powder was. I led them to the cabinet under the sink. The wadded-up newspaper was still there. As they carefully opened it, David looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend how the quiet woman he thought he could control had turned the tables on him. Jessica just cried, claiming she had no idea, but her own words in the text messages condemned her. That night, I took Leo and our important documents to Brenda's house. I wouldn't let him spend another minute in that home. David was taken in for questioning. The days that followed were a blur of police statements and meetings with my lawyer. I provided my medical records, the video, the texts, the lab reports. Mr. Evans helped me present a clear, chronological case. I learned to speak factually, without emotion. The truth was enough. David was eventually arrested and charged. The insurance policy he had been counting on became the primary evidence of his motive. Jessica, as an accomplice, faced charges as well. Her reputation was ruined, her life upended. As the saying goes, you reap what you sow. Our divorce was finalized soon after. David fought for custody, but a child psychologist's report on Leo's clear terror at the mention of his father, combined with the criminal case, meant I was granted sole custody. Holding the court order, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a profound sense of relief. The war was over. I no longer had to watch every glass of water, every plate of food, every footstep in my own home. Eleanor faded quickly after that. The shame and heartbreak were too much for her. She spent her days staring into space, whispering, "I didn't know. I never taught him to be like that." Before she passed away, she held my hand, her tears soaking my skin. "Take Leo and go, Sarah. Build a good life. Don't let this turn your heart to stone." After her funeral, I left that house for good. I found a small, clean apartment with a sunny window for me and Leo. At first, he was quiet and easily startled. I didn't push him. I just gave him consistency. Meals on time, regular bedtimes, trips to the park on weekends. Slowly, he began to smile again. One day, he wrapped his arms around my neck and whispered, "Don't be scared anymore, Mommy. When I get bigger, I'll protect you." I held him for a long time. I didn't teach him to hate. I taught him to value kindness and recognize evil. Looking back now, I understand a painful truth. Sometimes the person who hurts you the most is the one you trusted the most. But it was from that pain that I learned how to stand up, not for revenge, but for survival. My survival and my son's. The greatest lesson I learned is that, in a marriage, love is essential, but clarity is vital. Never let submission turn you into a victim, and never stay silent when your intuition is screaming that something is wrong.